There's no job like this. This is the most important job in the world. Just as I did in my first term, we had a great first term, a great first term. I will govern by a simple motto: promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises.
Well, I hope not, but go ahead, David, bring us in. Yeah. He has a list. He's checking it twice.
Yeah. Well, uh, well, boys,
Yeah.
WTF, man. Uh,
Yeah.
got a lot to got a lot of splaining to do here.
Well, I
Uh,
tried to warn you guys, but you kept
yeah.
pounding on the thing. I mean, you want to talk how we got it wrong? I have a theory about how I screwed up. If we
Okay,
want to
All right,
wait,
well,
start
wait,
let's
wait,
talk
there.
wait.
about that
Let's
at length.
Yeah,
wait.
yeah,
Are
no,
we gonna
it's
do? Are we gonna do the
multi-part.
self? Are we gonna do the self-flagellation thing first, or the explanation of what happened in the election first?
Well,
No,
they're
I want
kind of
to
the
let's hear
same
yeah,
because
let's
they
hear
start
Murphy do
with
the
All right.
self-flagellate.
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Has been
I don't know what
waiting
I'm
for
doing.
this ever since I predicted Biden would be driven out by a bed debate. All right, here we go. From the heights of that to the absolute gutter of saying I think I said I had medium confidence she was going to win. So a couple months ago, I think a lot of us who've done this looked at this and thought, particularly during Biden, he's toast. Inflation politically kills presidents. This is going to be a
Mhm.
change election. And when people want to fire an incumbent on economic pain, stuff costs too much, their bar for the new person is pretty low. I think the Carter people woke up to that surprise. They thought Reagan was an old clown. Nobody would take him seriously. But, same thing. Big ejector button. Try something new. So then I found myself going down the rabbit hole of, well, this time could be different. One, she isn't Biden. She looks different. She was in the background during the Biden years. She's generational change. She's tone change. All that stuff seems different. The Dobbs thing has made the Democrats overperform all the way down the row. That should be different. Trump's ceiling, we all talked about a regular Republican would have been dancing on the Democratic ticket under all the economic pain change argument. And now Trump's so bad, so crazy. The last week, the fact I was hearing from top level people around Trump land that, all the people there who were waving from the podium Tuesday night all thought he was going to lose. And so I kind of came around. This time is different. And then Seltzer, who probably had the toughest night after Kamala Harris, who I have a lot of respect for and has
Yeah.
traditionally been really on it, was yet another log on the fire of, I think she'll edge it out. Trump's so
Yeah.
bad. But
Seltzer
the
kind of
truth
lost
is,
she kind of lost her fizz this time, I think. But
yeah,
anyway, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Anyway, just to wrap this up, it turned out we all got a little too smart, or at least I did. We should have looked at it simply: 65 to 70 wrong track, inflation, fire
Right.
everybody connected with the
Right.
status quo, and blow it up with the orange guy who may be scary, but things were a hell of a lot better for my pocketbook when he were president. And I think in many ways it's simple as that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that it fundamentally 28% right track number, 40% approval rating for the president of your party, for whom you're the vice president. Economic numbers or attitudes towards the economy sour. Just there are two numbers I would give you. One is Biden had a 40-59 approval rating. Among the
Yeah.
59 who disapproved of him, she lost 82 to, I think, 16. And the second is on who can bring need. There were four. They gave him four choices as to um, uh, reasons to vote, and one was ability to lead. That was 30%. Trump won that 60-33. But number two was can bring needed change. And Trump won that 74-24.
Yeah. Yeah. Ejector button.
Yeah. We will talk about, I'm sure, things the campaigns did. And I think the Trump campaign did a lot to fan the thing here, but I'm not sure, Heilemann, that these forces were not immutable. I mean, I think there may have been nothing. Maybe if the Democratic Party had nominated somebody who was completely divorced from the administration and could kind of run against incumbency generally, they would have had a shot, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. The tide was big, and it's been big all over the world. Incumbents are on the run, have been on the run all over the world. So you
Well,
got a counter spin to any of this?
not a counterspin, but just I think that the phrase that you just used, Axe, which is incumbents, that they are on the run, and I guess you could say incumbent parties. There's a lot to talk about the Democratic Party and it
Yeah.
what it doesn't get about the country and what it needs to do if it's going to recover from what is now, going to be a 12-year period in which Donald Trump has dominated our politics. He dominated our politics when he was president. He dominated our politics when he wasn't president, and now he's going to dominate our politics for the next 4 years. That's as long, if you consider George Herbert Walker Bush part of the Reagan era, that's a 12-year period where a formal politics associated with certain charismatic leader is going to dominate our politics a long time, and Democrats are going to have to really make a bunch of changes. But I do think like the incumbent thing really matters, because her situation was so complicated because of the fact that I think we would all agree, maybe, I don't know if you guys would agree, but given how long it took Biden to decide to get out of the race, where we were, how close you were to the Democratic convention, I think she was the best available choice. I would have been terrified sending someone like, who I otherwise might think would have been a stronger candidate, someone like Gretchen Whitmer, who has never run a national campaign, not once, hadn't been vetted by anybody ever, had never had to play on that level.
Yeah.
Without going through the rigors of a primary, I think Harris was probably the best choice and the most unifying choice, and Democrats had to get unified at that moment. So, but she's also the sitting vice president.
Right.
And so if change was what this was about, it was a complicated thing, I think, for all of us.
Impossible.
Because was Trump change? No. Is the sitting vice president change? No. And I think what ended up being the case was that her association with the Biden administration, which obviously she's intimately associated with, became more dominant. That looked like more like stasis. That looked more like what you had to move away from than Trump's brand of politics, which in fact have also been
but I think
dominant for 8 years.
I think
I'm saying
all
hers
of us
ended up being the unmovable, the thing that was the most obdurate. You couldn't get rid of her connection to Biden, and that ended up to David's point. But maybe some other Democrat, if you'd had a proper primary,
Right.
I think they probably could have beaten Donald Trump.
Well,
given
a
how
primary is
terminally
a great credentialing thing. You get to
Yeah.
win stuff, beat other people, be somebody. I agree with most of that. I disagree on Whitmer. I think we overlooked the expectations for Harris were very low because she was such a train wreck in 19. And I agree. I thought it was a B plus campaign. If it had been an A campaign, I think they still would have lost.
Yes, that's what I agree with.
Because it was about hit the ejector button. And I think a lot of us fell for this kind of overthink that, well, when people talk about change, they're talking about tone. No, they're just saying shit costs too much. Fire these clowns. And well, Trump was change because they knew that everybody in power now, including in the pop culture and the media and the woke establishment, as they would say, all hated Trump. So enemy of my enemies, who I remember was better at running the economy, I don't care that he's Andrew Jackson and pisses on the White House carpet. He's not this crowd, and I want to punish them, led by Joe Biden. Now, I do believe the biggest blame has to go to Biden, who should have been one and done a year out, so he could have had a primary.
Right.
And a Gretchen Whitmer could have beat some people, or somebody else.
Might have.
But
So-
Mike, just to be Mike,
Might
just
have,
wait,
right,
wait,
it's all
wait, Phil, let me get in
hypothetical,
here,
but I
guys.
don't
Let me-
buy that Kamala
Let me
was
get in the
better
middle
than
here.
Whitmer would have been.
Let me
just
just get in here for 1 second, Heilman. I said a year and a half ago, I started raising these concerns about Biden that I said were actuarial concerns, and they were. And the reason I started saying that a year and a half ago was because I was hoping that he would get out and allow for a primary, because primaries are how you do find out who people are and how they can, like I wasn't sure Barack Obama, as gifted as he was and as good an experience as I had with him when he ran for the Senate in Illinois, I didn't know how he'd stand up to the kind of rigors of a national campaign. He was pretty thin-skinned as a Senate candidate. I didn't know how he would handle that as a presidential candidate. He grew enormously through the process. And we threw her, we threw Harris into the deep end of the pool 100 days before an election. And she well overperformed my expectations. But she had one, the one fatal flaw was something she couldn't change and didn't appear willing to even try to
Right.
deal with, which was she was the vice president. She was
Right.
the number two person in the outfit that they wanted to fire.
Right, right.
I
That's a
don't want to.
Gordian knot.
I don't want to get too. Mike. Just to be clear about what I was saying
Yeah.
before, I don't think that Harris necessarily would have won a competitive primary against the field. I don't think she was necessarily the strongest candidate. I think maybe Whitmer would have been, or Bashir, or Wes Moore. I don't know. But all I mean is that if part of the problem, as David has said before, was that you give in the last 90, 100 days of a campaign, it's like a boxing match. And if you ask one candidate to just fight the boxing match and the other one to fight a boxing match, and also deliver a tone poem to America about who they are, you can't have one person who has one job and the other person who has two. And given that, I think that the reality of picking the best known Democrat nationally, given the terrible circumstances they were under, made Harris the best pick in a bad circumstance. But I don't think that means that she would have been the best candidate or would have won a primary or in the ideal
Yeah,
circumstance.
no, I get you.
But
It's a totally fair
I
argument.
think she probably. I think Whitmer would have been. There are a bunch of candidates I think might have beaten her in a primary, but we don't know. And to David's point about
Right,
the primary, not only do you get tougher and better and get to do a dozen live televised presidential debates, but like Barack Obama, you get to go campaign in 50 states,
Right.
and everybody gets
No,
to
you
know who
build
you
a
are.
national persona, right? It's a great
familiar.
horse to ride.
Right,
Totally
people
agree with
get-
that.
Can I go ahead,
Just
Mike?
let me get one
Yeah.
thing in here. And I don't disagree with you because I think the reality was it would have been very hard to do anybody else. But knowing what we know now, which nobody knew then,
Yeah.
not so good.
Yeah.
Right.
We
Well,
gotta, I mean, I don't know if she could have been better, and I don't know if there is a miracle candidate. I would have tried something else, and that was my gut at the time.
Right.
I was for the Carville mini primary, anything, because I've always thought she's not a strong candidate. Though that said, I still doubt in this environment of the big, simple, get them out, any Democrat could have beat him.
right.
Yeah.
And
Well,
she did
one
that-
thing,
and she-
one thing that speaks to the what we're talking about here, that the die was cast, was we all sat here a few days ago, and said she closed well, he closed badly. The truth is, if the exit polls can be believed, very
late
few people
deciders.
decided in the late as stanzas of the campaign, the last week or two, and he got more of them than she did, which But one little postscript on the Biden thing, and this is me taking advantage of the fact that we have this platform to vent. I read a quote from an unnamed Biden aide saying, the Obama people ran Biden out in 2016 and he would have beaten Trump, and they ran him out again this time and he would have beaten Trump again. Bullshit. First of all, if you,
I agree. Go for it.
don't hide behind some anonymous, come out to the daylight and say what you have to say, put your name under it, and then let's have a discussion about it. But don't be such a sniveling little coward that you put an unnamed quote out there saying what is absolutely bullshit. Look at the guy. Look at the guy.
If Biden had been a nominee, the Republicans would have the House by 25 seats today.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
it
can I-
is
in.
it
I-
is
if
so
I were-
ridiculous.
But David, his performance on that Zoom call with the
Yeah.
Latinos was,
Yeah.
or the one in New
Yes.
Hampshire where he said that Trump should be locked up. I mean,
Well, the
time- and it got-
garbage line that put her on a rocket path to victory.
That's
These-
the Zoom
these-
call I'm
these-
talking about. Every time he went out there, he was sterling in the late part of the campaign. How can you say that Joe Biden wouldn't have won? He
And
crushed-
let me add one thing. We talked about the fact that he should have gotten out earlier. The people who are giving these unnamed quotes are the people who are in this kind of bubble of enablers that should have gone to him long
Right.
ago and said, "Cash in your chips, boss. You'll be thought of more highly,
Right.
and
Right.
you'll give your party a better chance to win." But they are all, holding hands in this circle of
No, they were part of the
denial.
cover up. Let's call it what it was. I wrote a piece 2 years ago, I think, of 18 months on Substack. Joe Biden needs a friend. And I made exactly that argument. Someone's got to tell him.
And
If they loved him, they would.
and let's just acknowledge that beyond the David, I understand why you're pissed, but if and I I'll be pissed too if somebody I think it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. But here's the thing is that it would have been better for Biden. This is why
for
my
sure.
thing
Much better.
was the he needs a friend was Joe Biden's legacy is going to take a beating over this. And the truth is, like, the best chance of Joe Biden to have the legacy he deserved would have been for him to say, I beat Donald Trump and saved the country from him. In the wake of COVID and an insurrection, I passed bipartisan legislation and I stopped the red wave from happening and led the Democrats to a relatively successful 2022 midterm. And now I'm going to do what I said I would do, which is hand the baton on to a new generation of Democrats. That is the highest probability path towards a great legacy for Joe Biden if he had done that.
And it's what he promised he'd do.
This was an act of not doing that was an act of narcissism and self destruction.
You know what? If he had, yes, you were right. Both of you guys are right. If he had walked away, which is an unnatural act for a politician,
Completely, painfully.
If he had walked away, it would have been country over self, and country,
country first, as John McCain used to say.
And I think people would have admired him for it. And it really. I've said my piece.
Well, no, and you're factually right. It's an inarguable position, which is why they're making it off the record. Heilemann, let's face it, after a night with, some alcoholic beverages and other adult libations involved, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to in my younger, wild years. I want to feel better the next morning, so I have to make a choice. I can either have a great night or a great next day. That is, until I found pre-alcohol.
I got to say, this is a very practical ad that has great practical and recent applicability for me because we're just past election night. And I bet, Mike, you had a few drinks on election night. I certainly had a few.
Oh, yeah. James Carville and I were doing the thing with Brian Williams. And let's just say certain adult beverages were something we were really hoping for.
Look, Z-Biotics was the answer on election night or any night like election night. And given how things are playing out, there might be a lot of nights like election night in terms of alcohol as we move into 2025. Z-Biotics, that's the pre-alcohol probiotic drink. That's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after you've had a few too many. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, like people often say, that's to blame for your rough next day. But pre-alcohol produces an enzyme, a special enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. So all you gotta do is remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night, then drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow.
That's why I get why everyone is talking about it. And with their GMO technology, Z-Biotics is continuing to invent probiotics that will help with everyday challenges of modern living. So, Johnny, how do we get this wonderful Z-Biotics?
You go to zbiotics.com. That's Z, the letter Z, BIOTICS, zbiotics.com/hacks to learn more and get 50% off your first order when you use hacks as instructed by me just now at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied with this product in any way or for any reason, Z-Biotics will refund your money, no questions asked.
Remember to head to zbiotics.com/hacks and use the magic code HACKS at checkout for that incredible 15% off. One other thing, I'll get out my very dusty and torn little Republican flag here. I think another lesson in the election.
You still have that thing?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Are you crazy? This battle-stained thing that's been for 40 years and a hell of a lot of campaigns with pride. There is, and this was part of Harris, and it's a bit of the Democratic cataract sometimes. I had a really smart Democratic consultant who you both know, but I won't put him in trouble by dropping the name. Say, we got all the smart-ass pop culture people, you know, we have all the elites, we all have money, we just don't have any votes. And the woke stuff that's cool when you have mid six figures on your tax return or higher, we just got to understand how off-putting that is to so much of America. And you know, there was some of that to this Trump thing too, and she
Oh
carried
my
that.
gosh, yeah.
You know, that was kind of her vibe, and it feels very comfortable if you're having a dinner party at Tina Fey's house. But it out there where they're
As
bending
one
metal
does.
and parking squad cars for a living, it's not only a shortcoming, it's an off-putting vibe, and
Mike,
that's something the Dems got to figure out
Mike,
how to rediscover. I had a friend of mine, a UAW Detroiter, watched the convention a couple of conventions ago and said, you know, I'm supposed to be a Democrat, but I watched a Democratic convention and I never see anybody I think can change a pickup truck tire.
right.
You know, just the vibe of it.
Well, because everybody takes public transportation, you know.
Yeah, for
But
solar powered dune buggies.
but the
Oh,
but listen, this is exactly what I've been saying for a very long time. The Democratic Party is a self-styled party of the working class that approaches the working class like missionaries
yeah,
and doesn't have a real connection to approaches the working class people in this country in a way that is patronizing, and that has to change. And there are
But
cultural dimensions to it as well. I mean, there's this sense of disdain. Go ahead, Jan. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to
that's
say, I
completely
think
right.
this is a little bit, but I think this is a little bit, with all due respect, I think this gets at the challenge that the Democratic Party faces, because the Democratic Party is not the party of the working class anymore. It's not. The coalitions have shifted. It's partly a result of what Trump has wrought. The Republican Party is now the working class party in America, whether you like it or not. In terms of how the results of the election
Yep.
is, people who are non-college voters favor Republicans overwhelmingly, and college-educated people favor Democrats overwhelmingly. That has certain advantages to the Democratic Party, but it has other disadvantages. And one of the things that has this disadvantage is the cultural thing you're talking about, David, because largely college educated people, not all of them, but certainly the most high profile ones, you know, they come across often as elitist and condescending. And so you have now an alignment where the people who make up the base of the Republican Party, not just the MAGA base, but the mass of the Republican Party, the people who voted for Trump and are going to give him a popular vote victory in this election, for the first time Republicans gotten that since 2004, are mostly working class people who look at the Democratic Party as cultural coastal elites. And whether that's woke or not, I think there's a lot of woke overhang, Mike. I think that's right. But that's the challenge for Democrats. How do you exploit the advantages of being the party of the college educated without while ameliorating the disadvantages of being seen as culturally out of tune with
Right.
most of the
Well,
country?
you know, I mean, first
Yeah.
of all,
And
Mike was around and he was part of this. That we all remember the Reagan Democrats.
Right.
We've seen these shifts before, and then, a Bill Clinton comes along and redefines the Democratic Party in a way that puts the party in a position uh,
100%.
to win. But part of what Clinton brought was respect,
Yeah.
respect for working people, and respect for culturally and economically. And we we should talk about sort of I mean, the Trump campaign. Trump himself is a runaway train, and he has a feral genius, and I think sometimes he doesn't get credit for it. I think some of the firestorms he started were that everybody sniffed at, were meant to begin conversations that helped him. So
yeah,
I mean,
totally.
it's not like he's. I mean, he is smarter than his detractors give him credit for. But the campaign itself will go down as a strategic triumph, because they, with great discipline, hammered this connection between Harris and Biden. We're using her own words, Bidenomics is working, and so on. And then the unfortunate comment on The View where she couldn't say if she differed with him on anything. And they just were discipline, discipline, discipline. And then the second piece is, and we need to talk about it, is that those trans
Yeah,
spots.
I was about to go there.
Yeah,
That
go
thing
ahead,
was a
go there.
laser sword. Uh, and again, part of the problem with changing the mindset of the Democratic Party, which I think intellectually can find this culture gap to the working class and cultural conservatives, they also look like the sociology department at Sarah Lawrence, and they get it all on paper. And I can hear La Savita chortling about, well, attack her for paying for sex change for prisoners. And there will literally be a debate inside the top of the Democratic Party. Is it too mean to push back on this? Because why not? And it's true. So they, tied them up in their own spider web. And she did come out for that before when she was being a lefty candidate. That's life. You'd come out for stuff, you own it forever. So it was a perfectly effective old school Republican wedge issue, right up there, flag burning for Dukakis, et cetera.
Right.
And while there's a lot of sniffing and, oh, I can't believe it, at places where you can get a $17 cup of coffee, out in real America, it had nothing but traction, and she never handled it. Just like fracking, where she gave every answer like it was a white collar criminal deposition, and it's a tonal thing the Dems get easily tangled up into. I remember once upon a terrible Southern politician I knew in a tough Senate race once said in a meeting, we're getting killed on cutting Social Security or some Dem issue, and said, well, we need to change the debate here.
Yeah.
I think we ought to bring out an idea where it's time to build a monument to our fine Confederate War veterans, which was a perfect, evil, cynical wedge issue to break black Democrats in the South away from poor rural whites.
Right.
And so that's an ugly politics, but it's easy to tangle the Democrats up in that stuff. And she walked into a buzzsaw there.
Look, that video was from 2019, and she was at a trans event.
Yep.
And she was pandering.
Well, on top of which, look, there's the one thing the Democrats said about that ad, which when I was in Michigan, I was amazed how many times I saw it. It was just constantly on. Was watching a lot of sports, and it was on it was just played. I felt like I watched it like every 20 minutes on every station. And it had Charlemagne, very, to your point, Mike, taken out of context, manipulatively edited, but, made it seem like one of these kind of iconic figures in Black America was outraged about the policy. Democrats answered that by saying, this was the law on the books under the Trump administration. And that is true. But when she would get asked about it, she would point that out and then very quickly move away from it. Yeah. As opposed to ever saying the words, hey, that was what the law said on the books. I said that in 2019. That was the law of the land under Donald Trump. He enforced that law. I said I was for it, but you know what? It's wrong. I'm against that policy. She never would say that. She would that for the reasons you said, which was that, she didn't want to infuriate anyone in the trans community. And I respect the trans community enormously, but this allowing an issue that affects so few people to become so resonant and so seminal and so definitive about the cultural argument is campaign malpractice. You must try to knock that down. When you saw how much traction it was getting and how much they were airing it, and they were airing it because it was working, you had to do more to address it than they did.
She came up through, just very quickly, David, up through Democratic interest politics in California, which is how you get a seat for life in California, one party state. But it's also a weakness. When you go to that college, Whitmer would have known how to handle that question because she's lived through Macomb County in a swing state. And that's part of the problem for candidate recruitment with the Dems. Dukakis was another example.
Yeah. I mean, there were, I saw a focus group. Well, I talked to a guy who conducted a focus group, and this came up. And, he said, people say, well, no one cares about that issue. He said, but the point is, they worry that she cares so much about that issue that, and then the other thing is the issue of someone said in the group, I don't care what people do, on this. I just don't want to pay for it. So that was a big element of it. I just, I know this will infuriate some of our listeners, but we're hacks, and Murphy and I have done a million campaigns, and you just have to say from a an execution standpoint, their advertising campaign will go down as one of the great sort of, it'll go down with the one that Roger Ailes ran against Mike Dukakis and you
Yeah,
may
it
have
was
been
very
involved.
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2000, in 1988, Dukakis came
Right.
out of the Democratic Convention 17 points up. And in the next 6 weeks, they just defined him.
We ground him down. Alex Castellanos and I worked for Ailes on that campaign
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
general.
Well,
And
I thought you were
I
involved
saw
in
the
that.
playbook coming out here,
Right.
and it's a good, simple playbook that people in Everytown USA get. And it's kind of scoffed at, in the elite world, but out in the real world, it works a lot. Hey, speaking of Harris campaign mistakes, I've got to issue an apology. I want to
Oh.
apologize to the Slotkin campaign. So we did a poll 2 weeks out in Michigan, and I'll be quick because it's EV stuff, but it's important. 74% of Michigan voters said they thought EVs were, something they'd heard a lot about in the campaign. And Trump spent about 20 million. Trump in the Senate committee on the Republican side in the open Senate seat between Slotkin and Rogers spent about 20 million saying EVs are going to wipe out Michigan. We had a response ad up, but we had no money. Slotkin put up a response ad that I thought was a little too defensive, but it basically said, hey, I don't drive one. They're great if you want one. And those jobs are either going to be in China or in Detroit. You pick, which was our argument too. Slotkin won. Harris never ran any advertising. 2 weeks out of the election, we asked people, is the move toward EVs, the push toward EVs, which is code for the Biden stuff, good or bad for Michigan, the auto capital? 2-1, they said, is bad. Bad for Michigan jobs and the economy. Trump totally won the argument. She never responded. Her group said, oh, it's not an important issue. Well, Slotkin responded and ran, I don't know what it's going to land up being, 35,000 points ahead of her, and his new name is U.S. Senator. Harris didn't. So that was just a tactical screw up where the Slotkin people got it right. And though I thought the ad was too defensive, kudos, they ran it. They ran a good strategy there. They didn't let what was a huge issue in Michigan campaign kill them. Well, Harris didn't, and Harris got hurt a lot. People who depend on the auto industry for their livelihood, that's 20% of the state. 24% auto industry and manufacturing voted for Trump by double digits.
Murphy, you are just a wellspring of self-reflection today. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like this.
It was a character building experience.
The same could be true.
I think I'm going to withdraw from politics and have a fun life for a few months because I'll still be on the side I'm on, and I do have one idea for the Democrats we can talk about later. But following Trump minute to minute, like, a toddler with a chainsaw, is just too goddamn exhausting. I don't think it'll be quite as much of a disaster as people worry about on fundamental institutions and rights, but it could be.
If you are a hackaroo, aka someone who listens to this podcast on a regular or even sporadic basis, one thing is sure, you care about what's going on in the world, and especially the world of politics. And while listening to the three of us is great, if you want to get even more great coverage, insight, news, analysis, opinion about this crazy, messed up world of ours, you not only should subscribe to the Washington Post, you need to subscribe to the Washington Post. Hacks on Tap is sponsored by the Washington Post. And when you go to WashingtonPost.com/hacks, you listen to this podcast, you can get an exclusive deal to subscribe to the Post for just 50 cents a week for the entirety of your first year. Hacks on Tap is a podcast that couldn't even be made without the Washington Post. We all read the Washington Post. Axelrod, Murphy, me. We read the Post for its coverage of Capitol Hill, its coverage of the economy, coverage that it does on climate change, foreign policy, the White House, everything, not just Washington either, the world. Last time I read the Washington Post, I could count that in a matter of minutes ago. I was reading the Washington Post. And at any given moment, in any given day, I could answer that question the same way. When have you last read the Washington Post? Well, just a few minutes ago, because the Washington Post comes to me over the web. It comes to me on the app that I have on my phone. I read the Washington Post obsessively multiple times a day to keep up with what's going on in the entirety of the world that I cover. If you're in a rush and you need to catch up quickly on the day's most important and interesting stories, the ones that really matter, the ones that really cut through, the Post newsletter called The 7 is a quick commute read. They send it out every weekday morning, and it's also available as a podcast. I said before that I read the Post every day, multiple times a day. You know what? Well, the best things about it, it's on top of the news. They break news, they cover the news, they analyze the news, they opinionate about the news. These are the people who know our politics best, the people who understand what's going on in the Capitol as well as anyone alive, and they are really on top of the story. They are legendary, the best in the business. And on top of all that, the stuff that everyone knows about the Washington Post, the stuff that it's famous for, they even offer a cool feature for audio lovers, just like you. You can actually listen to the articles that they publish in addition to reading them. So you can tackle your to-do list and catch up on the news as the Washington Post covers it at exactly the same time. So whether you're a reader or a listener, the Post is for you. With the election now in our rearview mirror, but a new administration rapidly approaching on the horizon, now is the time to sign up for the Washington Post. So like I said before, WashingtonPost.com/hacks to subscribe for just 50 cents a week for the entirety of your first year as a subscriber. That's 80% off what their typical offer is. So this is truly a steal. Once again, that's WashingtonPost.com/hacks, HACKS, to subscribe to the Washington Post for just 50 cents a week for the entirety of your first year. And so go back to the top. The first thing that we played the sound of Trump saying promises made, promises kept. I think this is maybe not a good hacks on tap topic, but maybe because it's the thing that everybody in your life,
Well, give it a whirl.
But everybody in your life is worried about this, right? We all said with varying degrees of urgency and alarm that this is an existential the existential stakes of this election were between democracy and authoritarianism. And Trump gave a lot of evidence, a lot of things he said to the promises made, promises kept joke about things that he was threatening to do, using the military against his political opponents, calling up Liz Cheney to put her in front of a military tribunal, fantasies about having journalists shot, wanting to be a dictator from day one, it's throwing out the Constitution. You're
bumming me out here, man.
He said a lot of shit. Right? So I ask you to, Mike, I think just made his position clear. I don't know what I think about this, right? Because my general view is Trump tried to do some of this stuff in his first term. He was held back by people who he will not let anybody like them near him in his second term. How worried are you actually about the beginning of seeing a slide toward fascism, authoritarianism, like the actual dismantling? Steve Bannon was on TV the other night saying, we are going to tear the Justice Department down to the studs. We know how to do it now. We are coming for you, Joe Biden. We are coming for you, MSNBC. We are coming for you, et cetera, et cetera. And we are going to administer rough Roman justice. That guy, and so it's bravado. Yes, I'm with you. I can laugh it off, but I just, David, you're looking a little gray. Like how much should we,
It's just it's the lighting.
No, I meant the color of your skin, not the light from the hotel window. I mean, how much do you sit there and go, holy shit, this could be coming?
Listen, I think that the big question is how much, because we know that he had these impulses when he was president last time, and there were people around him who said, no, we can't just go indicting everybody you don't like. We can't indict your former, now he's like all whipped up because he thinks that's what was done to him. And the question is, who is his attorney general going to be, and what are they going to tell him? Are they going to tell him the same thing, or are they going to say, when he says, jump or indict, are they going to say how high? How are the regulators going to behave? We talked about this last time, or in the last week, when Bezos kind of bridled the Washington Post from making an endorsement for Harris. He did it not just as the owner of the Washington Post, but as a businessman who has big dealings with the federal government. And so what are the regulators going to do? What are the budgeteers going to do, who make these, decisions as to who gets what contract? He has tremendous leverage if he just breaks down the kind of norms that have governed these decisions in the past. And are there people there who are going to say, you know what, why don't we just concentrate on delivering on the stuff that we promised people, and not, get on this binge of retribution? And I don't know, Murphy. I don't know.
I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish, and I despise Trump with the power of 1,000 suns. I have since I first had to deal with him when I was working for the governor of New Jersey in 1993. But I think one reason Trump was somebody people thought get him out, put Trump in, things were better 4 years ago, is they all think he's a bullshitter too.
Yeah.
He's a condo salesman. So they discount some of this. That may be a
Right.
mistake, his crazy stuff,
Right.
but I think Trump will be torn because on one hand, he's a populist. What's that really mean? He wants to be popular. Oh, I'm not going to do any tough fiscal stuff. I'm going to spend popular money, popular. So the stickier fights, I think he'll avoid. He wants to be loved. It's all about a father. I think it wasn't so nice to him. So I'm not sure. I think some of the stuff that he sees as transactional with the wingnuts in the party, now that he's czar, he can ignore them.
He
That's why he
wanted
keeps trying to bury 2025. So I'm not sure his instincts are going to be quite as bananas. The thing you worry about, this is where Heilemann was, is personnel, because personnel is policy.
Right.
And we're not
Yeah.
going to have some of the grown-ups. On the other hand, Operation Grown Up is underway. The Senate Majority Caucus, there's a
Sure.
race to staff now. And I think Trump will have some dregs in positions of power. The good things is dregs tend to be incompetent too. So we're see. And I think
Right.
Trump will be distracted by shiny objects to some extent. So I think on paper, the threat is there. In practice, I think you're going to have a cranky old egomaniac playing with the toys and wanting to be loved, which may get him to back off a little. If Susie Wiles is chief of staff, she is a risk avoider.
May I ask, I want to
Not a
ask one additional
revolutionary.
question here. Just to say he tried to invoke the Insurrection Act when he was in office, and
Yeah.
and Esper stopped him from deploying the military against protesters. He tried to have Joe Biden arrested in the final days of the campaign in 2020, and his attorney general and his White House counsel stopped him. He has tried to do this stuff, not just thought about it. He tried. So here's my real question to your point, Mike, about populism. I have now read multiple polls in the last couple of months that the mass deportation program is now a majority supported issue, at least in theory. That obviously, I don't think these questions have been posed to people in a way that will make them actually contemplate what it would look like if you tried to deport 12 million people from America. But do you guys think, as a matter of politics, to go back to Hackville here, that Trump starts to actually put together a deportation force and starts throwing people in trucks?
I think it's
that's
like the wall.
popular?
He'll try and he'll start and it'll be a horror show and some 7-year-old kid's going to get killed and the country's going to back up a little.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one that they're going to deliver on something there. Can they deport 10 million people, or are they going to, I mean, someone's going to explain to him, if we deport 10 million people, the economy is going to ground to a halt. Inflation is going to shoot up again.
And crime is going to skyrocket because you're going to have every person in law enforcement across the country engaged in that pursuit, because it's the
Which
only
is
you have
back to the
use all of them.
incompetence thing.
Right.
He'll do a photo op with 200 people in new SWAT uniforms, and they're start deporting people, and there'll be 20,000 in, and it'll be wall-to-wall trouble and everything. So he'll try, but I don't think the mass will get into deportations. But still, it's going to be a nightmare for some people, and it's going to be just horrible.
Hey, Mike, I've just come across this amazing new product. It's called Lumen,
Oh, yeah.
the world's first handheld metabolic coach. And when they say metabolic coach, what they mean is a high-tech device that measures your metabolism through your breath, Mike. You breathe into it and it measures your metabolism it's connected to an app.
The science works. I know that. I think Axe actually got one of these things. He's our tester, but it's pretty cool. It tells you a lot.
Well, I've got one and it's really cool. And you breathe into this thing, it reads your metabolism, and then you have an app that's connected to it. And that tests and lets you know whether you are in fact burning fat at that moment or burning carbs, or what combination of those two things you're burning. And it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even your stress management, because that's the whole ball game right there when it comes to dieting. I hate to tell you, it's not just about how many calories you take in. The question is, are you burning fat or are you burning carbs? And how does that actually affect your body, your body fat composition? A lot of people want to lose weight. I don't know about you, Mike, but this campaign's been hard on me. I needed to drop a few lbs here, and I think Lumen's going to help.
I'm a paradigm of fitness, but yes, I want to know more to be more effective. This gadget is pretty simple and pretty cool. All you have to do is breathe into your lumen first thing in the morning, and you will know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning, again, mostly fats or carbs. And lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for the day based on your measurements. It's not generic, it's specialized.
Yeah, I would like to keep my measurements to myself, but I guess I got to give them to the lumen people.
Mine are only in certain magazines.
You can also breathe into it before or after your workouts or your meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips about how to keep you on top of your health game. Your metabolism is your body's engine, Mike. It's the thing that keeps you chugging along. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel, and the fuel is what keeps you going.
Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits for you.
So if you want to take the next step to improving your health, go to Lumen, that's LUMEN.me, lumen.me/hacks, HACKS, hacks, to get 15% off your lumen. I'll spell it one more time. That is LUMEN.me/hacks for 15% off of your purchase. Lumen, we are so grateful to you for sponsoring this episode of Hacks on Tap.
I think the other thing that's going to happen is, I think he'll be monetizing the office as he has before, and we'll see a lot of that because he has 4 more years to do that. Let me ask you guys a question. What do you think the public reaction is going to be when he pardons the J6 people
and shuts down the all the criminal cases against him?
Well, that's underway.
This is a big problem for the Democrats, because I think they're going to want to litigate this all the time. Everything like that, the backward stuff. And if I were them, just from a point of political strategy, I would not get into base feeding on that, because I don't think the country looks at Trump with kind of fond nostalgia, pre-COVID economy and everything. So
do they look at the insurrectionists with fond nostalgia? Do they want to see them
maybe
freed?
not, but it's the price of beans. I mean, I think the Democrats should have a very simple strategy. One, the hard thing to do, which is fix their woke crazy. I don't know if they can. Axelrod, you should go lead that fight. But more importantly, the whole thing is the midterm congressional elections. In 2 years, we're going to pick who has the House. Right now, it looks like the Repubs may hang on. It'll be very slim, waiting on late California mail-in ballots. We'll see. We don't know yet. But 2, 3, 4 seats. So that'll be unstructured. But generally in the first term, midterm, incumbent president gets beat. And my guess is all the controversy around Trump will make him very vulnerable. And so the Democrats have to be the best they have ever been at candidate recruitment, and really swing for the fences in the midterms to get the House, which is the checkbook, back, and the investigatory thing. Yeah. So lots of howling on MSNBC about outrage about January 6th is good base chow, but it doesn't move that needle. It's the Italian campaign of World War II. It's not D-Day or the Russian front. And so the D trip is now the most important thing, I think, in short-term organized Democratic politics. And they're going to have to be great, not go to the sociology department at the community college, but find candidates who have wide appeal and run a 40-state massive midterm press. Because one thing that'll do is it'll chill the Repubs who care about majority more than anything. And they know the House majority is really in danger. And that'll have a freezing effect on some of this stuff. So yeah. I think that being careful about relitigating stuff that makes 36% of the country really, really mad, and get into the stuff that'll win 20 seats in a midterm and grab an institution to slow them down. And then you can go impeach them 20 times and do all your base stuff. But they got 20 months here to get the best midterm congressional House campaign put together in the history of the Democratic Party. And it is.
David, I've seen you on television a lot at odd hours the last couple of days, poring over exit polls. So here are my questions for you. As you look at the one thing that no one disputes is that Trump, that the Democrats have a problem with Hispanics. It's not news. We've been people have been saying this for years. Yeah. There's particularly Hispanic men, but yes. So that's a problem. When you look at the exit polls, what are the insights that you glean with respect to coalition politics in 2 areas? One is Democrats in the black vote. Now that exit polls are imperfect, but we have some data on that. What's the standing of the party with African Americans? Number one, and number two, the gender dynamic. Republican strength with men, Democrat strength with women. What do we take away from this election as Democrats think about fixing their problems? How big a problems they have on either one of those fronts?
Well, first of all, we sat here on at the beginning of the weekend. We said one way you're going to know how this election goes is if is looking at the gender numbers, and if she is beating Trump by a margin that's equal or greater than the margin by which he beats her among men, she will win the election. Well, you know what? He beat her among men by 13 points, and she beat him among women by 8. So that there wasn't even close to parity in that. And they had again, talking about strategy. I mean, their campaign was very much aimed at men, and particularly young men. You look at the things that he said, the podcasts that he went on, the Rogan thing, and many others. I mean, they had a very calculated strategy to run up the score among these young men. I will also say, let's give a shout out to America's new oligarch, Elon Musk, who dialed up the algorithms on X.
Trump's actual running mate.
Yeah, but also I think
that's going to end badly, I predict. But go ahead.
And did some things relative to turnout that in Pennsylvania may have been helpful. We've talked about his giving away money in there to help identify because first-time voters or irregular voters, low propensity voters who would vote for Trump, and they flushed them out. One thing that Van Jones said last night on CNN, and he's right, that we thought that Democrats would do much better on election day because they had a massive organization. Yeah. And he held up his phone and he said, but they had this, and they were digital and social media really hard to flush out these young men.
Is that your verdict? I mean, is your verdict on this that again, I was one of those people for sure who said on the basis of what I had seen on the ground in the blue wall states that
I was being polite.
Well, no, but I mean, I'm serious. I mean, like do we now think on the basis of the results that the Trump untraditional stealth ground game plus with Twitter added in, that was every bit the equal to and maybe better than the operation that Jen O'Malley Dillon
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't.
Is that the conclusion? I don't know.
One thing that is clear is there was a big wave that and you look at they actually did better in the battleground states in terms of fall off from 2020 than they did in states where they weren't running a campaign.
They being Trump, or they being Trump?
No, I'm talking about the Harris campaign. They did the
Harris campaign.
They did less well everywhere. I have it written down here somewhere.
But let me give a contrarian opinion. Two things that the media obsesses on that are bullshit. One was Haley voters. He got 94% of Republicans. The whole never Trump thing was Washington window dressing. A lot of people worked hard. They're all my friends. Didn't make a hill worth of beans in the big macro fight. Second, the most overrated thing that is 90% bullshit in a general election, which I've always believed, but I don't say a lot because a million people scream I'm an idiot and I'm a media guy and what do I know? Ground game. A lot of wasted horseshit money that makes a very marginal thing. Now, in a lower turnout election, different story. But in a big general
I disagree.
With huge macro, I know most people.
Look, I'm a media guy too.
One of your peers called me up and said, "Can we finally say the ground game is such bullshit?" I said,
no, but I think the ground game has an impact. It doesn't have the ability to offset
never decisive.
a wave. It is decisive in a very close election, and it actually, I mean, I
Yeah,
saw
but
it,
this
Mike.
wasn't that.
I saw it in 2008, and if we didn't have this
Yeah, but that
army,
was a message thing. I would much rather have message because ground game can amplify it. You get a better ground game when you're winning on message.
well, okay, that's
When you're
fine.
macro losing, the ground game is just a bunch of
But
pins on a
let me
wall
just
and at great cost.
yeah, I feel like I'm part of this argument that you had for years and years and years when you were trying to get more money for spots. But here's
No,
a
no, no. Come on.
here's
That is a cheap shot. It is not
I
true.
also liked it
It's
when
I
from
Mike.
just hate the ROI of paying people to talk to other people who are already voting for you.
I
yeah.
also like that Mike, the one of the leaders of Republican voters against Trump, started out by saying this whole never Trump thing is bullshit. That
Well,
was
it
also
was
one of
this
my.
year. It was.
I know,
Look at the
I know.
data.
Well,
I
you
enjoyed it.
look at
I,
the numbers.
All the
That's
stories about the Haley voters and all
right.
that. This
Right.
was
lot
a
of
big force election, and all the little stuff that we like to obsess on, particularly in the process
right.
press, was
Yeah.
overrated cable TV chat chum.
Yeah.
This thing was
Well, you look
fire
at
the
the
guys
numbers.
that were in, and enough with the woke horse shit.
They
That's what
both did very well among their parties. There's
the
no
same.
evidence in the numbers that there was the flaking of Republican voters from these Haley voters. If they were Republicans, most of them voted Republican. But this is what I want to say: the the bigger shift from 20 occurred in non-battleground states. So in non-battleground states, Democratic performance dropped 3.5 points. In battleground states, 1.6 points. And part of what made that difference was people on the ground, but it certainly wasn't enough to make up for all the other things that were going on. And yes, I do think in terms of getting to a constituency they thought they could organize, I think the Trump people used uh, the podcasts, the digital, social media effectively to reach, because they actually won among voters who were
No, but
first-time
I see that
voters.
as communications and message. He's very at home on Rogan. She ducked it. The demo, I'd say, tells the whole story. In addition to that reverse gender gap thing, which is huge and shows most of the, again, elite, pre-assumptions were out the window. Trump did better with voters under 30 than any Republican since Bush in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
it is impressive. And she did worse than anybody since 2000.
Yeah, but some of it has to do with how they communicated, so, how they communicated methodologically. Some of it had to do with the fact that in a social media age, Trump himself is a more effective communicator.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
you
he
know,
gives conflict and entertainment, which is what social media is built on.
right.
I have one other
Totally.
large question to ask you two geniuses. Okay. In the 2020 election, I'm literally, these are things I puzzle over at this moment. In the 2020 election, granted, it's a COVID election. It was a totally unique circumstance, but Joe Biden, 81 million votes. Donald Trump, 72 million votes. Okay. That's, I think, 153 or so million people voted. Right now, we don't have the full numbers in yet because California, as you said, Mike, is
Right.
still coming in. Harris at 68 million votes. Trump at basically the same number at 72. Okay. Given the stakes raising and other things that went on in this election, and Trump trying to come back, I'm a little surprised that not only that's 140 million votes so far versus 154 million votes, that turnout is down
Well,
nationally that much.
well, before you go too far down this road, Nate Cohn just tweeted from the Times. Our last estimate for the final turnout in the presidential election is 157.5 million.
So he thinks it's going to be over. So that many votes are still
almost
still
matching
out.
2020
Okay.
in raw votes,
Yeah.
though falling a tick lower as a share of eligible voters given population growth. So as a percentage of the whole, it's lower.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think
Not
that's gonna
dramatic, not dramatic. And you can account for that by COVID and the pent up energy around. Like COVID can account for the fact that why that was a little bit higher, right? It's a
Yes.
percentage.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
this outcome was not about some turnout surge. It was normal. It was about massive shift in attitudes, choice people made, and the issues they cared about, which were not the ones on the white wine and cheese agenda. They were on the meat and potatoes, unhealthy food agenda, so to speak.
Well, I
No,
gotta say, I
can.
mean, let's be fair to Harris about one thing. I mean, she didn't campaign on a woke agenda. I mean, she was stuck with some of the stuff she said in 2019. What the biggest point, Mike, is that on the issues that really fundamentally mattered, the the die was cast. You'd had,
Right,
Yeah.
fire them, and
three
she,
three and a
yeah,
half years, 3.5 years of inflation and discontent
right.
on the economy, which Joe Biden did very little to talk about in a way that would have ameliorated the problem. Plus, Harris then inheriting all that basically cast the die. That's really the takeaway. Is that not?
Yeah, that is the big
That's-
mainspring, and we kept trying to find sophisticated reasons. At least I did, and I think I wasn't the only one to say, "Oh, this time it's different.
Yeah.
It's
Right. And
jobs, it's
Yeah. I mean,
generational,
John,
it's first African American, Indian. It's this, it's that. We're finally going to break the glass ceiling. All the things that are important to people who generally don't have to worry about the grocery bill."
I think that you're right, John. She didn't campaign on the so-called woke issues, but the videotape from 2019 obviously was
sure,
damaging. And then the
totally
Democratic Party has a branding
has a
issue
woke
Yeah, there
problem.
you go.
100%, 100,
in
100%.
this regard.
Careful,
So
you
here's
might
here.
trigger
And
them.
I'd say
Yeah.
one last thing about this, just to be really, I mean, this is a woke thing or not a woke thing.
I'm feeling
The
triggered.
the immigration thing is still a huge problem, right? I mean, you look at those
Yeah,
Latino, we talked about very briefly. I raised the Latino thing.
yeah.
I think I think the problem with the Democratic Party's problem with African American voters turned out to be overstated. Its problem with Latino voters did not turn out to be overstated. And we're back in a place where Donald Trump,
Yeah.
they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime. Donald
Agree.
Trump wants to have mass deportation, is now a guy who's close to getting half of the Hispanic
Well,
vote
it's
in the country.
always been a
And
mistake.
Democrats must
Yeah,
deal with
yeah.
that.
To assume that Latino vote is about identity. By the way, I would
They
officially
must deal
say
with it.
it's no longer the Latino vote. It's an American vote.
Right.
And stop trying to think. This was a mistake they made last time. They kept sending on the Biden campaign Kamala into Dade County, thinking they had some identity argument of color with Latino voters. They're assimilated. It is not the handle economic issues were.
It
I,
turns
I
out that
hope, by the way, that when they clean out the Harris headquarters, somebody leaves a post-it note for the next one, next Democratic campaign that runs, saying suggestions. One, don't screw up the border and avoid inflation.
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
there it
Turns
is.
out that
Well,
Hispanic voters want a secure border as much as
right.
non-Hispanic
Or a good
voters.
wage. Look
Yeah.
at those Rio Grande districts in the energy patch that were overwhelmingly Democrat and have all swung.
They want
It's
to know,
hourly pay. It's not, let me talk to you about your heritage, and we're bringing
right.
in some speakers from La Raza for you here to
Yes,
talk
it's
about
about
identity.
wages. It's about wages, and it's
Yeah,
about
it's about
safety, and it's about
having a
all the
life.
things that are animating a lot of voters. As we wrap this thing up, I want to play a bite from Kamala Harris's concession speech, and let me just also parenthetically give her credit for making one. We as a country, for perverse reasons, we as a country benefited from Trump winning and winning decisively because we were spared the ordeal
Completely.
of the chaos that he would have rained on the
Yeah.
country had he not won. And she did what past Democrats and Republicans have done, which is she yielded to the will of the people and acknowledged it. But she did say this.
But please know it's going to be okay. On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win.
That was widely interpreted as her saying she might be back, that she might run again. I'm not sure that's what she was saying, but looking ahead, do you see that in the cards? I feel like I think she did overperform, and I am not going to dog Kamala Harris. I think she had some big moments in this campaign, that debate, the convention speech, and so on. But it seems to me there's going to be no dearth of candidates in
Yeah, generally
2028.
people in politics never give up when they've had the big ride. If I were her, I wouldn't. I would say it's in her interest. And I thought her speech
I
was
know.
moving. And by the way,
I was
Trump brought
joking.
up a cage fight promoter. There was no thank you to the opponent. There
I
was no
know.
grace.
I know.
It was as usual. It was Trump. But she was cheated by Joe Biden's greed from the fair shot to prove excellence in a primary. Maybe she would have, maybe she wouldn't have. But she didn't get that. So she got put in the rocket chair, and did her best. I'd like to see her go be excellent, and maybe a Democratic primary would be it. I
I
guess
I bet every,
she needs the
I
story.
I think there's going to be. I think part of what's going to happen is there's going to be candidates are going to come forward with their theories of the case about what the Democratic Party needs to do and what the Democratic Party needs to be, as Clinton did, you know, and in some
Yeah.
ways, as Obama did
But let me ask you
when he
quickly,
ran.
Ax
Yeah,
and Johnny, just quickly, and then I know we're running out of time.
yeah. I want.
Can the
I have one thing I
Democratic
want to say at
Party
the end. Yeah, go ahead.
change? Can the Democratic Party change? Because it strikes me the political incentives inside the Democratic Party are very different from the incentives that you would want to build a party that can win a bunch of these swing states, which are tighter than the national meeting.
I
I mean,
think that
it's very hard.
yeah, I mean, I think that we always make this mistake of assuming that the Democratic Party is some far left party. I mean, that's the image that
That's the
certainly the
brand,
Republicans.
unfortunately.
Well, yeah, but it's not the fact. And the fact is that Democrats never nominate candidates that are on the far left flank of the party.
Hence
Democrats
Biden
always, and one
in
of the things
2000.
that, you know, one of the things that one of the mistakes that people make, sometimes people on the left and sometimes liberals, is to assume that you know, people of color, Hispanics and blacks and so on, are a left-wing vote.
Yeah, totally
they're
wrong.
not,
Right.
no, it's about, but the people who are strongest against the defund the police is the African American voters who actually rely on police for public safety. Here, to answer your first question, Alex, I know you want to probably go last here, but I want to
Yeah.
answer Mike's question and your question. Mike, I think the Democratic Party has in the past, notably in the Clinton period, which is really is a worthwhile analogy. If we're going to get to the end of 12 years of the Trump era, you know, the party is going to be even though they won the White House for 4 of those years, they're going to be desperate to get back in. And I think that there's already in the mainstream of the party a pretty decent appreciation for the fact that defund the police and some of the wokest stuff from the 2019 and pandemic era is political death. I think a lot of those people who we talked about as potential successors to Joe Biden, Gretchen Whitmer, Bashir, Wes Moore, Josh Shapiro, those are not woke candidates. Those are not lefty candidates. And those are the candidates who we're looking at, who I think are all those people are at least plausibly going to run, looking at it, thinking about it. And I think I think the party can move itself back. I don't know if it will, because the left will still be
Well,
loud and there will be a fight for it. But you're asking, can it? Can will?
Yeah,
And
no,
let me
I think
say-
it can. I'm not sure it will. We'll throw this to Axelrod for the big finish, but
Well,
I'll throw a mini question. Oh, go ahead.
I want to
and
answer
then I'll
David's
do it.
question. I just as I finish
No,
that
let-
last
let-
thing, just to say David's question. I think she will run again. I think Harris will run again for the reasons, and I think she's going to hear all of us saying it was Joe Biden's fault, not her fault, and that's just going to encourage her to run again. I don't. I mean, I would be shocked if she didn't. Put
It'll be
herself,
tough.
in
I
that
think it'll be
race.
tough. But let me ask
I'm
Axe
not
a
saying she's
question
going
to
to win it.
set him up for the big. But I wouldn't bet against you on that, Johnny. Once they run, they taste the. They've been to Paris. Can the Democratic Party ever nominate a Southern white Protestant male again, like Clinton, like Carter, who tend to win national elections for him?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the thing that made Clinton and Carter, and you know, viable was they were as comfortable in a black church as they were in a union hall,
Southern.
particularly Clinton. And you know, I think I certainly wouldn't rule that out. I mean, I thought, for example, in 2020, you know, I thought Mitch Landrieu would be a good
Yeah, on
candidate
paper,
for
yeah.
that very reason. But so here's what I want to say, you guys. I watched that concession speech by Kamala Harris, and to me, the most moving thing was to see the faces of young people, particularly young women, uh, in the crowd, tears in their eyes, and dejected and filled with despair. And my message to um, all of us, but particularly to young people, is that um, we have gone through periods before in our history where you know we thought that the changes were dramatic and irreversible, and this is the way things are going to be. But the wheel of democracy can be awesome and brutal, but it turns, and it turns, and the only thing, in my view, the only thing that threatens American democracy is if good people, and particularly young people, become so cynical about it that they walk away. And I feel like there are going to be battles ahead, and there'll be a change of direction, as there has been, before. But I just want to, I want to hug every one of those young people who are in that crowd and say,
Yeah.
there'll be another day. Stick to it. Stick
Hey,
at this
20
because we need you.
24 months. We're going to have a big, big one.
Yeah.
David, we'll send out some people into the crowd to get consent before you give that hug. Just
Yes.
You don't
I
wanna
walk
trigger
around with those
anybody where
forms on me.
Yeah, the patriarchy goes
Yeah.
in and tries to force hugs that are unwanted.
David's
hey,
like, I want to hug
quickly-
that crowd whether they want it or not.
All right. Well, I can hug you guys though. So
Okay. You have my-
we'll do that.
You have
Anyway,
my
we're gonna wind up
my
in a Trump
provisional
ad.
consent.
No mail,
okay,
no
so
mail, no mail today.
mailbag this time, but
Yeah.
send questions, hacksontap@gmail.com, post-election questions, hacksontap@gmail.com for next week. You can do a voice memo on your phone and send it.
So next week, my pals are going to join me at the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago, where I hang out, and we're going to do this podcast in front of a group of young people. I'm really looking forward to that, and I appreciate you guys doing it. I'm going to take you both to Manny's, my favorite deli, to compensate you for your time. So
Fair deal. Lunch or dinner? I got to figure out my plane tickets.
well, we can negotiate that off the podcast.
This
Goodbye.
is a Chicago negotiation. First,
Goodbye,
we
everybody.
sign the contract, then we negotiate.
See you
All
next
right,
time.
everybody. America endures. See you in the midterms.
Courage.